Welcome to Brains, Bibles, and Beyond, where we discuss theology and worldview apologetics. I'm Nate Day with Think Like Christ Ministries, and I'm here with our resident theologian Joel Willoughby with Brains and Bibles.
If you would like more information about our ministries, check out our websites, brainsandbibles.com and thinklikechrist.org. And on whatever platform you are using, please like, share, subscribe, do whatever else you know you should do to help us out.
If you have any questions, send them to podcast@thinklikechrist.org.
And all you budding theologians out there, go grab your favorite theological coffee receptacle and enjoy this episode.
This is a Christmas special edition. Was Jesus really born in a stable? You decide. So, Joel, what references are we at today?
Well, yeah, the primary text has got to be Luke 2. Luke chapter 2. So,
Okay.
a lot of people very positively will tell you all about how Jesus was born in a stable with animals around him, straws flying everywhere. It's just Joseph, Mary, Jesus, the animals. They might throw in the wise men, which you've already debunked that they were not there at the time of birth. And so there's some misconceptions there. So often I would say to someone, you show me in Scripture where it actually says that Jesus was born in a stable or barn or something like that. And they come up dry. They come up pretty dry. It's interesting.
Now, this is a topic I've never thought one bit about.
Sure.
I've heard the Christmas story. He was born in a
Yeah.
stable.
Right.
All right?
Yeah. It makes sense. We see the plays every year.
Yeah. They laid him in a manger. Why would the manger not be in the stable?
Right on.
All right. So why don't we dig into this a little bit? Explain to me what in the world you're talking about, because this was a new one.
Let's read. Do you have in front of you Luke 2?
I have Luke 2.
We should read just read right through 1 through 7.
Okay.
That's our context, and we'll start from there.
All right. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census took place while Quirinius was governor in Syria. Did I get that right?
Close enough. It's a foreign name. It's hard.
Yeah. So all went to their to be registered, everyone to his own city. Joseph also went up from Galilee, out to the city of Nazareth, into Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary, his betrothed wife, who was with child. So it was that while they were there, that the days were completed for her to be delivered, and she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn.
So right there, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, does it tell you exactly where he was born?
No.
No, right? Yeah. It's just, we can maybe assume this or that, but just taking the text at face value, no way could you positively say he was definitely born in a stable or barn from that text, right?
No.
And
there's
that's
assumptions because of the manger and all that.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to go through all that.
And there's no room in the inn.
There's,
They clearly went around to all the hotels, knocking
All
on the
the
door.
hotels.
I've seen the play.
Yes.
They knocked on all the doors.
right.
Nobody. There's no room for you here. Take that pregnant lady to the barn.
Right.
You saying that's not true?
Where else would you tell the pregnant lady to go when she's great with
Go
child?
to the barn.
Yeah, go to the barn. All right, okay. So, so just we're not going to discuss why they went to Bethlehem. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
The fact is they went
Clear,
there.
that part's clearly obvious.
Yeah, they went there.
There's a registration.
There's a whole thing about
Go
that,
write your name
but
down. Go back
Okay.
to the city that your family's from.
something like that.
That part's
Sure, I'll let that go for now.
well, it's in there.
So let's move on. And so then Joseph and Mary, they were betrothed. And so just for clarity there, really quick, this was legally binding. It was like marriage. In fact, a lot of times they might even just say married, because it's that legally binding. You would have to divorce to break it off.
Sure.
And so this was like engagement, but like way more committed, legally binding, all those sort of things. So some big stuff. That's where they're at. Now, Bethlehem was both Joseph's and Mary's ancestral hometown, because Joseph and Mary are both from the line of David.
No, that's also true.
That's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so, like, no matter how you slice it, Jesus is the son of David. Like, you can't, like, no matter how you try to get around
in both
it,
directions.
he is
Yep.
he gets full rights to the throne. Okay, by blood or by adoption or however you want to look at that. So, so he would be welcomed there. Them both, they would be welcomed there without questions. It doesn't matter if this was maybe an illegitimate child coming or something, because there was those questions.
I'm sure there were maybe questions.
Yeah, there was definitely those.
You can't say without questions. There may have been questions.
Well, not
So Joseph,
not the first
when
night.
did you get married?
Not the first night, right? They wouldn't have busted that out just then,
Okay.
So, but what, like, as far as giving them a place to stay, there'd
Sure.
be no question for that. All you'd have to do is, at most, is you have to say, like, recite the lineage. Hey, I'm son of so and so, son of so and so, son of so and so,
Son of
like,
David.
they're like,
Oh, yeah.
you're our guy. Well, they all knew genealogies,
Sure.
all of them.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't take that far. You could figure out the family tree.
Yeah.
And it would be totally good. Well, remember, this is an honor shame culture out in the East and everything. And so it would have been the family, whatever home they would knock on or something. And I know it says inn. We're going to get to that later. But right now it's going to say home. If they come to a home, they knock on the door, recite the lineage, it would be a total huge shame moment for that entire family for like generations to come if they had no way to be hospitable to them.
Sure.
That would have been horrible. So we have to just kind of put ourselves in that time and that culture, that sort of thing, which is much different than today. So let's move on from there. So then, of course, notice another small observation here in Luke 2, but notice that Mary gave birth while they were there, wherever they stayed. So we don't necessarily have to understand that Mary gave birth that first night. She stayed in Bethlehem.
Yeah.
So sometimes there's that impression.
While she was there,
Yeah.
her time was done.
Right. So
We don't
sometimes
know
it's
how
like,
long
man,
it was.
they're traveling while she's right about to give
Yeah,
birth.
the baby is coming out as I'm knocking on doors frantic.
Yes,
That's
yes.
the idea that a lot of people portray, and we don't know that for sure.
Right.
It could have been, but it
doubt
it could have been, but it doesn't actually say
Technically.
that.
It technically could have been.
Right.
I doubt it though, because being super great with child, bounce around on a donkey over some rough roads.
It's the reason it was born that first night.
But it's another one of those things with Christmas plays. You
Yes.
get the impression, at least, if nothing else,
You
that
get the impression
it was
that
immediate.
Joseph is running around frantically to
Yeah.
all the inns, and there's no room. We can't possibly kick anyone out, so you got to go sleep in the barn. That's the picture. That's always painted.
I've heard a lot of times too, where it's the inn.
Yeah.
So here's a small little town with only one hotel, and that's why it all got full.
Not even a hotel. This is a motel.
It's a motel.
It's a
That's
motel inn.
nothing wrong with that, but okay.
No, but it's not a hotel. There's a difference.
Right. Because it's a walk-in,
Yeah, there's no swimming pool or continental breakfast.
That stinks. All right.
I wouldn't
anyways,
have stayed there either.
Maybe Mediterranean breakfast.
Yeah, whatever that is.
Well, they're next to the Mediterranean.
That's true.
Okay. You give me way off track here. I will say, though, kind of interesting, just a little fun fact here. We have a general idea of how long they stayed, though. Because it couldn't have been all that long until she gave birth. Couldn't have been all that long. She was great with child. Remember that statement and things? And then you have the 40 days of purification. After the days of purification is when they went to present Jesus in the temple, being the firstborn. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so that part was in Luke 2:22. And so it talks about the days of purification. Days of purification are 40 days.
Okay.
So you have that 40 days after the day of birth, then they would have left. And so then how many days was it until birth? Probably, I'm guessing, maximum like 2 months. If you're great with child,
Sure.
So a rough idea. But you're talking like 3 months, maybe, maximum 3 months.
So why do they have to stay so long in Bethlehem just to write their name down and get counted?
Maybe just want to hang out with family for a while.
Yeah, maybe because she's about to have a baby and they want to travel.
It was, you got to remember that it is not like the Western culture today, very individualistic in things, very communal, very communal. So I don't think it would have been crazy to stay for a while with the family, extended family, sure, but friendly people around you.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, moving on. Okay, so I'll give you some reasons why there has been the whole stable barn idea for a long time.
Well, it says a manger.
That's one. I'm going to do these in order, though. I have an order here.
Okay,
In
okay.
my,
Go in order. You tell me.
I am going to address that though. So the first one, because I think I want to go from like simplest to the hardest. Okay.
Okay.
So Isaiah 1:3. And if you want to look that up and read it, Isaiah 1:3.
Isaiah 1:3.
Yeah, so that sometimes this passage here is viewed as prophetic to the birth of the Messiah.
Okay.
And I really don't think it is, but go ahead and read the verse.
The ox knows his owner, and the donkey its master's crib. But Israel does not know, my people do not consider.
So the idea is like the ox, the donkey, they know their master, who is God, who is in the stable with them, is Jesus. They recognize him. However, I would say there's really no reason to believe this is prophesying Christ's birth. I don't think they would have understood that originally when Isaiah is speaking. And I really think it's just God speaking through Isaiah saying, hey, look, even the dumb beast knows the difference between the one who owns him and the one who doesn't. And they know to obey their master. But you, Israel, you're so rebellious and stinking wicked. You do not know me. I am your owner and you are not obeying me. I think that's all that is.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one thing. Now, a lot of people wouldn't say that, but some do.
Okay.
So I wanted to address that. Okay, there's only 3 of these. So now we're on number 2.
Okay.
All right, so then you have the word the in,
Yeah.
as a lot of English translations would use. That word, the Greek word kataluma, okay? So it says, into katalumati. So in the guest room is how I think it should properly be translated.
Okay.
So you can check your
Sure.
translation at home and see if yours says in or something else. Most of them, I think, say in. And so really, this word is only used a couple times in the New Testament. But when it is used the other 2 times, it's a Mark and a Luke perspective of the same event. And is referring to the upper room where the Lord and his disciples had the Last Supper.
Okay.
So did they eat in a stable or a barn, the Last Supper?
If I remember searching right, it was neither.
Yeah, it would have to be, because the preparation for the Passover is the Passover meal.
Yeah,
Seder,
but see, there was no
all that.
room for him in the end, so they had to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
Right.
saying in is upper room doesn't mean that he wasn't born in a stable.
Okay. But you understand, though, that a guest room is not the same thing as like a hotel.
Yeah.
A hotel
I
would be
get
like where strangers are coming
that. Yeah.
randomly. Okay.
Yeah, I
Guest
get
room
this.
is like, this is my house. I have this room that's meant for my
Sure.
friends.
Yeah.
So
Like we
there's
have a
that big
futon
difference.
in the shed, and someone can come stay.
right,
in it.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It's really great.
So we got a guest house, guest room.
So when they come to a place, because if the kataluma is the guest room is full. So they must have came to a house, a home. We'll say home. Well, because house might be misrepresenting what a first century Palestinian home is like. So,
Okay.
so they come to a home. They say, "Hey, the guest room is full."
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. So what happens? Well, what does the text say? It just says, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the guest room.
Yeah.
So really, what is it explaining? Why was he laid in a manger? Right? That's what it's explaining.
And manger's really like a food trough, right?
We're getting to that.
Okay.
That's the third thing. Okay. So I just
Okay.
want to...
So
Yeah, go ahead.
do any of the other gospels give this account
No.
in any other way? So this is the only reference to this right
This is
here.
it. This is it.
Okay.
Yep. This is you're going off very limited information.
So this wasn't a cave in the side of a hill?
I would say not.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've heard that too.
Well, I've definitely heard that.
Yeah. In fact, that was something that I had repeated for a number of years.
Sure.
Because it seemed to me the best explanation until I started doing some word studies.
Because that's what a stable was back then. That's what everybody tells you it was.
A lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would just be a carved out
Yeah.
place in the rocks. And that's, there was tons of carved out places in the rocks around there. That was
There's
pretty normal.
caves.
Right, exactly. Well, so, Mark 14:14, Luke 22:11, those are the 2 places where it uses that word and it's talking about that guest room
The upper
where they would
room.
have
Sure.
the Passover supper.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give them a break here because you could kind of see it this way. Depends on how many other uses in other literature that's used, because it has the idea of loosing. So the idea is that this is the place where people would loose their sandals before they eat. You'd loosen up, you'd relax. You would loosen the animals so they can have a break and get their food and water. Okay, so it's all about hospitality is what it's
Okay.
focused on, hospitality. And so that's where you kind of have the idea of this stable, because animals are being loosened, and so that they kind of got that thinking. Or it could be the idea of people are loosening their sandals and having a meal. Oh, it's kind of like a hotel where people come. And so there's a couple different ideas floating around, but those aren't. That's not the actual main idea.
All right.
And so I'll give people a little bit of a break here. So in the typical first century home there in Palestine, there was a place for animals below. It was below the home, and it was you had some stairs that would lead up, and then you'd have like the one main living area where the entire family would live. That's why when Christ even says you would light to lights so the whole house can see. Well, how do you light one light and the whole house can see? It's because they all lived in one room. Okay?
Sure.
So there's this main living area.
Yep.
And then you had the guest room. That's the kataluma. That's attached, and that was the whole home.
Okay.
Okay. So then so they're both upstairs, right? And then downstairs would be that open area where the animals would be tied
stable.
up. Yeah, something like that.
All right.
In modern terms, you could maybe say that, but
Well,
so
that's
the idea,
where you keep your animals.
right? I mean, but you can have your dog outside. You don't call it a stable,
You could.
right?
though.
You could.
That's where I keep my animals.
Right.
All right.
Absolutely. Okay.
So,
Reiterating here, real quick. Culturally speaking, there's no way if they knocked on the door and said, "Hey, we need help. We need someone to stay." There's no way they'd say, "You're on your own, pal. Go with the animals." There's no way that would happen. They would at least, if they were totally packed out, literally, I think that family would probably let themselves sleep outside, or go on the roof themselves, or they would say, "Hey, let me help you to our other friend. You can stay in this home." Something. They would make sure they're taken care of. Okay, let's talk about the manger.
yeah.
Because I know that you, from the beginning, you're like, yeah, the manger's where it's at. So,
Well, I mean, that's the thing that makes you feel like there were.
yeah, and
animals
I
there,
totally
right?
get that.
Like,
I totally
you know.
get that. Because
And
directly...
when the shepherds showed up, the angel's like, "Hey, go find a baby laying in a manger." They show up and they find him laying in a manger. Where do you put your manger? You put it with the animals.
I
But
will...
you say the manger isn't with the animals.
It is and it isn't. It is and it isn't.
Wow.
Okay.
Confusing.
So Luke 2, once again, is our one key. Okay? It's only... Luke is the only one that has this word in the New Testament. And it's only mentioned 4 times. 3 times is Luke 2, 7, 12, and 16. And it's all very repetitive. He's in the manger. Jesus is in the manger. So that doesn't tell you too much. Luke 13, 15, though, says a little more. And Jesus is preaching away at these stinking hypocrites. And he's talking to these Pharisees and stuff, right? He says, "Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to water it?" So then you have this connection with the animals, with the manger, and rightfully so. Okay? So the idea is, going back to that style of home, you have these animals underneath, and they are eating from the manger. They are being tied to the manger. Okay?
Wait, mine says stall.
It can...
And leads him from the stall.
translation, yeah.
Okay.
It's the same Greek word, though.
Okay.
It's the same Greek word.
Okay.
I like a Bible that has more consistent translation. No, it's okay. I'm teasing you. Okay. So
That
then,
would be an example right there, huh?
so that's just how translations are sometimes.
Yeah.
It's okay. But it's the same Greek word, and so that area below, the animals that eat from this manger, they're being tied to the manger. But what would happen is this manger was also up in the main living area. There was this opening, so they have the straw and stuff, and they'd put it down for the animals to eat.
So they keep the straw in the house.
So they could
in
put
the
it,
living
they
room.
could pop it in there. You can keep them fed without going out in the cold or anything. So you had this little area. So the manger was up there and down there.
I suppose
it wasn't
I
this-
suppose if you stored the straw in the stable, the animals would eat it. You know?
The place below where the you're right. You're right. You have to. It's like there's dogs and cats and stuff, right? Where if you were to always put food in the bowl, they would
Alright.
gorge.
So what? So what you're saying here is there was a house
Yeah,
or home.
a home.
It was a house. You can call
Sure.
it a home if you want.
Okay.
There was an abode.
Home's where the heart is.
And there was an abode, and the abode had two rooms. The main
Yes.
room where everyone lived, and a guest room attached to it, whether it's above it or next to it, or
Cataluma.
however
Yeah.
it was attached.
Right.
In the home was
The main living area.
something called a food trough or manger, where they
Manger.
could throw the hay in, because they stored the hay in their living room.
Yeah.
And they'd throw it in there, and it would fall down inside the chute to below the house where the
Yeah.
animals lived.
Right.
What some people would call a stable, some people would call it below the house where the animals
Sure.
live. Right?
That's fine. I just want to stay away from the word for stable for a while. I'm okay with it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying Mary wasn't downstairs with the donkeys.
Right.
She was in the main
The
living
main
room
living area.
when the baby was born, and then they set up in the manger, which would have been full of hay.
Yeah. The idea is like,
Okay.
look, the guest room was already full. At least it was full enough where we're not going to put a lady that's about to give birth. Like, there's not enough room to give birth. And so, come where we are, our family, we don't know how big the family was. And
No.
so, yeah, come with us where we're staying, because there is apparently enough room.
But if everybody from the lineage of David went home, the town would have been packed, I'm sure. There
Yeah.
were lots of people for
I
the
think it
last
would have
however
been
many
packed.
hundreds of years. And they would have been trying to stay with extended relatives, and people have been packing and trying to stay wherever. So,
And that's,
so the
that's a
idea
whole-
that lots of homes were packed full of guests is
Yeah.
it's true.
that'd be expected.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so the fact that the guest room was already full, that makes sense. And the inn being a guest room, that makes sense because I mean,
And it totally makes sense that he is Emmanuel, God with us. That he would be from the very beginning with people.
Sure.
And I think that's very, it provides continuity with all the prophecies and things. So how's that sitting with you?
Well, you just stop and destroyed all Christmas traditions. So,
Possibly.
yeah, lying in a manger. I mean, it doesn't say a barn, right?
Right,
So
right.
anyway.
So
okay,
you can decide.
okay.
You can decide.
So is this the same house they were in when the wise men came? Because clearly they weren't there the night that the shepherds were there. They came later. We don't know how soon later, but it took wherever they came from. They had to travel, so it was at least a few days.
Now, we already did our Wiseman thing.
We did our wise men thing. They
gotta
came
go back.
from a far distance in the east, and they came to a home
Mm-hmm.
when they met Jesus. Was this the home?
So I'm trying to remember, I can't remember off the top of my head, because they did go to Bethlehem.
They went to
So
Bethlehem.
they were still there. So she must have still been in her days of purification. That 40 days from the birth, before they actually went to the temple, and then, because remember they went down to Egypt as well, then back to Nazareth. Remember that whole
So
thing?
you think the wise men got there in less than 40 days?
Apparently so.
Because don't most people say 2 years? Well, that's
Well,
just made up, right?
You've heard that, right? Like a lot of other things. You hear these
Okay.
things.
These are questions my children ask. How do
Yeah.
we know Jesus was 2 years old when the wise men came?
Right.
Why? I don't know how we know that.
Herod said, let's kill 2 years and younger.
Yeah,
And
and that's why we think that.
Yeah, I
Because
think
he's
so.
like, hey, when did the star appear?
Right.
And
Right,
they
I
tell
think-
him, and then he goes and kills everyone 2 and under. So then that's the assumption then that, well, he must have told him 2 years ago.
Because he
But
wasn't
we
exactly
don't know
sure.
that.
Herod wasn't trusting everyone. He wasn't exactly sure, but he wanted to make sure this kid was killed.
Yeah,
So that's why he goes all the way up to 2 years
just to make
just
sure.
to make sure.
Yeah,
But that's when they were, they fled to
because
Egypt.
back then they probably didn't have ID cards, right?
This is correct.
So
No social security
although they were
numbers.
working on that, that's why they were in Bethlehem getting ID'd.
They were doing
and counted
something. They were doing something.
and registered. They were getting registered. So
to some extent.
never good. All right. Well, that probably wraps it up.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Is that satisfying?
our budding theologians can decide for themselves. This may be a lot for some people to take in.
It's a lie.
You just
Watch
stopped
the
and
video
destroyed
twice.
all kinds of Christmas tradition. That's what's next. She's going to tell us we can't have Christmas trees. So So when we decorate with like a nativity scene,
Yeah.
we should just throw the manger away and the nativity away. Just
You know what?
build a house.
Have fun creating your own nativity scene.
That's a lot of work.
And I'm not totally against nativity scenes though, because it can still be a good gospel witness. It can be a conversation starter, and people that don't know anything, that they're still reminded of Christ and who He is. They're not thinking about inconsistencies or something. I think it's important for us to be accurate.
Okay.
But
So when you say people that don't know anything, how much of our audience would be in that category right now?
well, what I really mean to say is like an unbeliever. Like an unbeliever. So when I say anything, I mean they have no relationship with Christ. There's there's nothing there. And so when they see it, though, there are certain things that are triggering in their minds, and it is forcing them to, at least for a brief moment, contemplate.
But aren't we teaching people inaccuracies about the Bible then?
I think there's always better ways to do things, but the gospel is resilient,
Even with our failures.
even with our failures.
Okay.
Isn't that amazing? God loves using weak and broken people.
I'm glad that God knows what He's doing.
Right? Amen.
So the house would have been really full when all the shepherds showed up. Now, did they bring other sheep with them, like I see in the plays where the shepherds showed up with all the sheep? They went right up the steps and into the living room.
It's possible they totally ditched those sheep. I mean, that would be very irregular. But I mean, you're talking like angels giving them messages.
And the Messiah is born that we've been
Yeah.
waiting for a long time.
Like when you get super thrilled, you don't think in a logical order. You don't think like, okay, but my responsibility is. Yeah.
Now, regardless, whether you believe He was born in the living room or downstairs,
Okay.
the gospel is still the same, right?
The gospel's the same.
What your belief on that doesn't change the gospel.
Right.
So.
It's really not a big deal.
So this isn't a big deal, but this is something at least interesting to discuss.
What I like to do is like to get people excited about Bible study.
Yeah.
And dig in. That's
Yeah.
good.
And the idea that you can't just assume everything based on
Right.
on how somebody told you
Yeah.
a story when you were a child. Because so many of us just assume, and that's why you ask the question, well, show me that in the Bible. Well, it doesn't ever say that.
As sweet as Grandma Betty might be, she might be wrong about a thing or two.
It's possible.
You got to go back to the Word.
And you could be wrong,
I could be wrong.
which is why we all need to study the
I
Bible
have
on
to
our
like,
own.
swallow that hard. But yeah, you're
You're
You're absolutely
we should,
right, yeah.
right? So, all
Absolutely.
right, well, I think that wraps us up. And everybody can go throw their Christmas traditions away and get new ones. So decorate your nativity house and and make sure that's a feed chute and not a manger.
well, it is a
And,
manger, but we have to rethink.
but it's not what a manger is.
We have to rethink
We
what a
call
manger
it
is.
it a manger, but it's not actually what we see a manger. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Everybody have a good day. Enjoy your Christmas.
Adios.